Good morning, and thank you very much all for joining us on this, what is a rather sunny day with me at the moment. It's not massively hot. As I say, I'm Jenny Milne. You're going to be joined by 4 other people today, and I will introduce them when the time comes. But today's cafe is a bit of a milestone cafe. It's the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, and the pictures you see there of cake, I am known as the Cake Lady. We're on Saturday when we were at the Royal Highland Show, and we did a bit of a launch on the Rural and Island Mobility Plan. So you missed out on some rather big cakes. If you see at the top of the page, it says BYOC Cafe. That is Bring Your Own Cake Cafe. I have had alternative suggestions made to me on what the C might stand for. Some of that might not be legal, and that is not my suggestion. Okay, my suggestion is cake. So I hope you've got something with you today. I had cake yesterday, and as you can tell, loads of cake at the weekend, so I have no cake. But if you have a cake or a fancy piece, I see Ali's got her cup of tea there. Now's the time to share it because it is a cafe. Good morning, Claudio from Madeira. Good morning. I see our community up in Dunvegan have a cup of tea, and it's in a nice cup as well. So that's very much traditional with a cafe. So thank you for bringing that along. If you're not familiar with a cafe, just a few housekeeping pieces. Just keep yourself muted at the beginning of this. Your chat box is your friend. Please just introduce yourself. Say which part of the world you're in, because quite literally we are from Madeira all the way to Melbourne this morning. So please just say hi, introduce yourself, and as I say, think positively and provide a bit of cake and humour if you can. And feel free to put photos of cake in the chat. And it's all about sharing ideas. Today we focus on the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, and then I hand over for a quick sneaky introduction from 3 speakers from throughout Scotland for what you can expect when we do the online gathering. So for those of you that haven't come across SRITC before, I am the founder, and this is a social enterprise for rural and island mobility. It is in Scotland, but as you can tell, we have 19 different countries represented in over 600 members that we have of the community. And it's about working together to make change happen for rural and island communities, helping to make change happen, sharing knowledge, which is what you're going to do, and be a collective place for rural and island communities, transport makers, policy makers. This delightful screen not only shows you a cup with a croissant, it also shows you the directors. Some of these faces will be familiar. Alex is here today. Ali McEnroy, that you may know. James Gleave is going to be speaking later on. He's a musketeer. And Doug is also here. And I think Sheila from Arran may also be here. We also have an advisory board, and some of those people are here today. And again, that's international, from Sweden to Italy back to Scotland. So these are the volunteers that are working behind the scenes to make SRITC happen. And as I always say, this is not our day job. It is our passion and our enthusiasm and our extracurricular activity, for want of a better description. I always provide a bit of news and insights of what's going on. For those of you that didn't make the last cafe, my Superwoman cape is off at the moment as I deal with this injury that I've got. So things are slightly slower happening, and I thank those that are helping behind the scenes, and that includes Rennie from Midlands Connect and James, who you're going to hear later on. They are going to the TPM conference next month for me, because traveling at the moment and presenting the Rural and Island Mobility Plan in person is just too much for me. So on that basis, a wee shout out, if anybody here is going to the Rural Bus Conference, we have had the Rural Island Mobility Plan accepted for presentation. Unfortunately, if you are already presenting, you're not on another topic for another organisation, you're not allowed to present for SRITC. So I'm really struggling at the moment. So if anybody is near Hertfordshire or can be in Hertfordshire on the 17th of July, to present the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, just please get in touch, drop me a message on Zoom today or by email. We also set up, for those of you that are new to SRITC, some focus groups. These focus groups are thematic, and we had the first one kick off this week on health. This is if you've got an issue, a desire, a passion, a challenge, whatever phrase you want to use on these topics. So there's health, tourism, we've put water transport, because that's from ferries all the way through to whether it's sea or whether it's estuary, different types of water transport globally, and car clubs and car sharing. So the other groups will be kicking off in September after everyone's had their summer break. So if you're not already signed up to those, then again, just get in touch and we can add that to your list. So the bit you're waiting for, the Rural and Island Mobility Plan. And I've put here helping to shape the future of transportation, because it is indeed. This is focusing very much on mobility and people. It's not about logistics and transportation with freight at present. So what is the RIMP story? How did the Rural and Island Mobility story start off? Well, for those of us that work in rural, and I have for too many decades now, it's really important to say that it's not something that is delivered, but it's often spoken about as a challenge that needs solving, rather than actually how do we actually deliver it. They see it as a challenge. And that really started to get to me for a while. And back in 2020, I'd already heard about the work the European project Smarter were doing. And they had looked throughout the whole of Europe at who had a rural mobility plan or an island mobility plan. And back in 2018, 2019, the only ones were Lithuania and Latvia. So I went, why don't we have one? We do have a national transport strategy, version 1 and 2, but we don't actually have a dedicated mobility and island transport plan. So in 2020, when we ran our online gathering, we had a workshop asking people what they would want to see inside of it. And slowly but surely, over Scottish Rural Island Parliament, other online events, cafes, gatherings, in-person gathering that we had at the Boat of Garton, we were in a position to ask for some funding because we gathered a lot of evidence, and you all contributed. A lot of you here have contributed to this process to get some funding from Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, which is sadly no longer available as a funding stream, but has done some great work. And through that, we were able to work on giving you this output today. But what makes this Rural and Island Mobility Plan different? It's quite simple. It's you. It's the people. The picture here is Boat of Garton when we had the in-person gathering in 2023, and we had people quite literally from all over Europe attending. Now, the wheel on the right is something that I've developed, and it's about trying to make sure we've got all the voices included from rural and island areas, whether it's government, whether it's tourism, whether it's social media posts that people say, I need to get a lift from here to there. So you won't believe me when I say it, but it is true. With all the activities since 2020, there have been over 1,500 organizations involved in feeding into this piece of work. So it really is grassroots. But we also have a lot of people from policy. We have a lot of people that are transport providers, service providers. So it is really our Rural and Island Mobility Plan, and that's everybody here. So what have we done in 2024, 2025? You'll see in the chat in a minute some links. If you haven't read these or seen these, then you can go and have a look at them. But these are all publications that we've put out to be able to help pull together today's Rural and Island Mobility Plan. So the first one was at the Mobility is a Scotland conference last year. We ran a workshop testing what we would call the framework. It looks a bit like a Guess Who game, if you remember from days gone by. And that was an output from the Scottish Rural Island Parliament in 2023. And we went, could this work for transport and mobility? And could we use this as a community or an organisation to actually help make us have a plan? So that publication's available and will be in the chat. We also went through a lot of documentation. It was about 80 pieces of documents from national level, regional level, and local level, looking at where rural and island transport fitted into the jigsaw puzzle. And there were quite a number of key findings. And again, you'll find that online. One of the key findings is the word language. The language that is used at grassroots level versus that at national policy level is a complete mismatch. So we've got that mismatch there. So how are we going to deal with it? We also have the final report that came out a couple of months ago, which for those of you that are international, you will probably feature in this. I'm very lucky that through the International Transport Forum, when I was involved with them in 2020, 2021, that I got to meet a lot of people internationally, and I have quite a large network, and as a result, so do we as SRITC. So key takeaway would be if you want to go and look at islands and you want to look at rural on an international scale, particularly America, then the content is there for you to read in those 3 documents. So we've taken the work from all these 3 documents, the last 5 years, and we pulled together the RIMP. I'm now going to hand over to James, who I've already mentioned in different guises. James has helped pull together the final report. So James, over to you to explain the key findings and summarize them. James.
Thanks, Jenny. I think I probably couldn't speak actually on behalf of everybody, kind of about your hard work over the last kind of few years. Even though kind of a lot of us helped us kind of get it over the line, as it were. You were kind of basically the driving force behind this. So it's the fact that we actually have these key findings and have this report is down to your efforts kind of more than most, I kind of think. Anyway, I will kind of kind of rattle through some of the key findings, and obviously you will all get a link to the report where you can go through these in detail. So what do we find out from all of this work, which Jenny kind of highlighted, was kind of 5 key things, and then a further thing. Then I'll go into a little bit more about actually what a RIMP then looks like. So, firstly, number one is there's a lack of current RIMPs globally. Jenny mentioned obviously the work of the Smarter project, and there are notable examples, such as, for example, Connecting Ireland policy, which kind of focuses heavily on rural. But those are the exception as opposed to the norm. You might have transport strategies which cover rural areas, or they are for organizations which organizations whose area is primarily rural, but there's nothing dedicated, no real dedicated rural Ireland mobility plans globally. And so this is a global challenge as opposed to one which is just for Scotland. The second is that kind of concepts are often lost in wider policy objectives. What we're kind of saying here is that when it comes to rural issues and kind of or like a specific rural lens on an issue, it's often very much lost in terms of trying to achieve a much wider objective, either for a country or for a region. We think this is probably actually particularly the case kind of in Europe, whereby we have kind of quite a central government, not central government, a government focused kind of model to delivery of transport services, whereby it's very strong public sector. They obviously have to do lots of different things and balance off different objectives. And so the nuance of rural areas can be lost. So, for example, a common policy objective is economic growth. And I've read too many strategies which, when it comes to mentioning rural areas, who seem to think that economic growth is 3 things: agriculture, forestry, and tourism. And anybody who's kind of been in a rural area knows it's much more nuanced than that. Then we have obviously perhaps then number 3, that goes into point number 3, which is around rural transport issues may only be seen from an economic point of view. And to be honest, I'm a transport planner, and this is something which is a challenge much more widely in transport planning and policy making, in that we have appraisal mechanisms which say that we need to think about economic return on investment. Rural areas are seen in terms of an economic opportunity. We should be supporting, also like the overriding objectives should be supporting economic development for rural areas. And some of the nuance in rural areas is then lost about what their needs are. Number 4 is around accountability as to who will deliver decisions. And I mentioned earlier on about, in Europe, we have a system whereby the public sector kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting, and it does a lot of the work. And that can come with challenges when it comes to accountability, when things do fail and when things don't work. For example, a bus service might be removed, or train services might be cut, or even things like the NHS, for example, a health service might close down through lack of use. And there's a lack of accountability when it comes to those kinds of decisions, or accountability is abstract. And that makes it very challenging in order to gain confidence in what you are actually doing in order to actually improve lives in rural areas. And then number 5 is demand responsive transport is a popular solution with other technologies underdeveloped. So we did actually try and look specifically at technologies and what technologies are mentioned within strategies. And demand responsive transport overwhelmingly was mentioned. Everything else around things like mobility, mobility as a service, even traffic management solutions, kind of paled in comparison to deliver DRT style solutions. So that's kind of like the key findings in a nutshell. also at the heart of the document is this diagram here. And I'll just try to very briefly explain as to what this diagram is trying to achieve. So we kind of recognize that when it comes to trying to develop and deliver policy, there's always like a bit of a friction, I kind of guess, between what public sector authorities are trying to achieve in terms of, and policymakers are trying to achieve, and primarily that's in terms of transport outcomes, but increasingly in terms of community, but increasingly in terms of wider outcomes, and communities and grassroots who are really looking towards community benefits. And what we're kind of saying here is that a RIMP provides an opportunity for us to all meet in the middle and to actually develop plans and develop policies and develop ideas and deliver them, most importantly, in a manner which actually results in change. Now, I'm going to go through the slices and then Jenny's going to do the fun bit on the left-hand side. But these slices can really summarize what's the key parts of a RIMP. So first of all is around local knowledge and data collection. So anybody who's worked on strategy has usually gone through a massive data collection exercise, usually involving scrolling government websites to find data on traffic flows and all that kind of thing. But what you really need to do in a RIMP is actually supplement that with local knowledge, because local people and local communities, they provide a level of intelligence which is slightly more qualitative, but actually really brings out what the experience is of transport issues in a local area. And that's not always captured in data. Then we go on to a collaborative vision. And this is kind of a real key step as part of the development of the RIMP, in that it's a vision which ultimately has to be shared between communities and policymakers. And there are ways by which you can develop this vision in partnership, and somebody might actually take the lead on technical work, but ultimately this vision in terms of what you want to achieve and what success looks like needs to be shared between the community and policymakers. So yeah, that's going to really important stage. Then you've got to actually start thinking about judging success. Now, I'm particularly hot on this, in that you've got to be able to tell people, this is what we know, how we will know whether or not we succeeded. A classic example is key performance indicators, and it can cover anything from accessibility of services to number of people using local buses. But other things might be slightly more subjective. They might be things like community well-being and social value. And there are ways by which you can measure that, but ultimately you should set out to judge success. And also, I would probably stress here, it's not just about transport outcomes. It's not just about, getting more people on buses. It's actually about how do you then measure what those wider benefits of what you're doing are. And we kind of mentioned social value and community wealth building as two good examples of that. Speaking of social value, that's the next phase. Yeah, I don't think, to be honest, I need to mention more of that. But what we need to do is, as policymakers, we need to understand what the social value means in the context of the local community, but also baseline it, and then ultimately judge our success of the strategy on it. Now, I know in the UK, for instance, that's a requirement under new procurement rules, but actually that needs to be adopted much more widely as part of policy making. Then a critical thing is practical delivery plan. You've got to, whilst having a vision is great, you've got to put together something which is actually practical. That doesn't mean you cannot be ambitious, and you cannot set yourself things like stretch targets or stretch things of what you want to do. But what you have to do closely between community and policymakers is actually identify what that practical delivery plan is. And one thing which I would probably stress here, which probably doesn't come out too much in the report, it's not necessarily about relying on government and a public sector to do everything. And to it might be able to do a lot of heavy lifting, might be able to provide services, might obviously build infrastructure and operates it. But there might be much more community-led and community-supported solutions, which can have such a big impact, which should actually be part of this delivery plan. But again, you've got to focus on practical delivery, because ultimately that's how it becomes legitimate. And then collaborative action, which is literally just going out and doing it. Personal bugbear, I've written far too many strategies, which have sat prettily on a shelf and gathered a nice thick layer of dust. I've probably collectively is about 6 inches of dust on the strategies which I've written and have been and sat there. But the way by which you actually secure that buy-in is, it's not just about the public sector being required to do absolutely everything. It's local, it's working with local organizations, local communities themselves, even really committed individuals to actually take action against all of these plans, all of what's in your delivery plan, and make it a collective effort. And I believe that's my part over with, Jenny. So you get to tell about the fun part, and I've got to pop onto another call in 5 minutes.
Thank you, James. And thank you very much for your kind words at the start. I know we don't tend to do a whole lot of PowerPoints when we normally do a cafe, but it's important to be able to visualize some of this for you. And building on the point that James said earlier on, one of the key things for me was to make sure that this just wasn't something that sat on a shelf. Because time and time again, you get people saying, well, we did a feasibility study and it sat on the shelf and there's no value in it. The social value piece is a massive theme for SRITC. And to that extent, on the left-hand side, the menu of options, the rural transport option appraisal, the template and the framework, the last dance framework that looks like Guess Who, which you'll see in the document. These are all practical tools that and it doesn't matter what hat you're wearing, you can use, okay? So you can make a difference. Whether you just take the last dance framework and want to use it in a workshop and try and bring people together to have those conversations, to build the collective vision, to work collaboratively, to work out what judging success means for you, because what success looks in one part of the UK versus another part, or on one part of Madeira, because we've got Madeira here, versus the other part, is very different. And that's why it's not a one size fits all. It's also not a case of taking something that's happened in city and urban areas and trying to make it fit into something that would be rural and island. And that quite often is the case. And I know many of you feel as passionately about that as I do. So on the left-hand side there, I'll give you an example. The rural transport options appraisal, we've got a section for you on it, but we also signpost you to examples that you can use from Finland, for example. Okay, for the RIMP template, we literally gave you the guidelines on what actions you need to do, how to set up a document and how to work through it and who you should be involved with. So it's all very practical, and the same goes for the menu of options. So don't just think of this as a guide that's been given, a plan that's been published. It's here for you to use, and you can use it as you wish to use it, and we can help guide you if you need some help on some of the aspects of it. But it is literally at the heart of that. I put an X. I really wanted to put heart, because at the heart of that is everybody, whether you are a provider, whether you are a policymaker, whether you're a community, whether you're wanting to look at community benefits or actually achieve some transport outputs. So there might be a better, more glamorous way of putting this together, but pizza slices seemed a really nice way of doing this and portraying it. So before I hand over to three delightful communities that are here, I just want to sort of conclude with some things, as some very obvious observations. The RIMP really is, for anybody, an opportunity to transform your area. And in this context, particularly for Scotland, okay? By adopting such a RIMP, you are leading with community. You're looking at values. You're not looking at a pure economic base. And you're looking at evidence. And that is a strong, strong motivator for people to work together. It's not just so-and-so says. You're actually using evidence here. What we're doing this week, by sharing the Rural and Island Mobility Plan with you, we will be disseminating and talking about it over the months to come, you can be sure of that, is that we're laying the foundation so that this can be tested by anyone, anywhere, whether you're in the UK or whether you're overseas, and how you can actually refine for your particular area a rural and island mobility plan. And obviously within that comes the opportunity with the social value and the wider piece. You're driving economic development, you're helping with well-being, and you're looking at environmental sustainability. Because sometimes it's not about the technology, it's quite literally about bringing people together to make that change happen and to have that impact. So before I hand over to those communities, really the challenge for anybody that's a policymaker or a community here today is to just grasp this opportunity because it's there for you. It has been a lot of hard work over the last 5 years. I can't drink at the moment, but I will have some non-alcoholic bubbly tonight. But work together to make this actually a reality. And it is a learning journey for all of us. But in Scotland, we now have the opportunity to create something special, and it's for the benefit of everybody here. And I am looking forward to the next 6 months, 12 months, 6 years, as it may be, to actually see how this trickles through and how people benefit in areas throughout the world from all the work that everybody has put in. And a special mention to my team who have put up with a lot of stress, I have to say, over the last couple of weeks, never mind the last couple of years. So with all of that in mind, how does this actually work and what are we actually going to do with it? When we have our online gathering, which we had to postpone this year, mainly because of my health reasons, we're going to be doing that hopefully in March next year. The communities and hearing the voices of communities and what they're doing is really important. So I'm going to hand over to 3 lovely people that have been quite willing to speak about what and they are going to share in spring 2026 and also what the RIMP means to you and to them. So I'm actually going to change the order slightly and I'm going to start with Alice Fogg, who is then going to hand over to Peter. And Peter is then going to hand over to Caroline, and then I will hand over to the floor and you can ask questions and not about any cake that I've eaten this week, but anything the speakers have said or anything that I have said about RIMP. So Alice, sorry, moment there in my mind. Alice, where are you? I can't see you, but hopefully you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Let's get an intro. Hi. Go for it.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Alice Fogg and I'm the Chief Officer of Voluntary Action in Badenoch and Strathspey, or VABS. And VABS is a small local charity that supports community groups across our Strath, our rural valley, with the aim of helping them shape and create their own futures. So we're based in Badenoch and Strathspey, which has 12 community council areas in it, about 14,000 people, and about 500 community initiatives, organisations, assets, clubs, societies, charities. The whole gamut of community activity is going on here. And then across the last 3 years, VABS, with the kind financial support of the Cairngorms National Park Authority, has facilitated community action plans across the area. So we've currently got 11 community action plans that are up to date from 2022. And those plans we've done individually with different communities. They've had between a 20 and 40% involvement rate. So like really high levels of community engagement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about transport and where that fell in all of those, because I think Donald Hall from Community Connections, which is our local transport company, said it the other day, that transport is the golden thread that runs through everything. It was really interesting, actually, seeing that transport's often framed as an economic issue, whereas we've actually stuck it in every single part of our plans. You know, it's an environmental issue for people. It's a social issue for people. It's an economic issue for people. It's affecting all aspects of community life across every single plan. So all of these 11 plans that have been completed, transport is the major, if not one of the major themes that's coming out through nearly all of them. So that it sort of trickles down in different forms. There's a lot of talk around public transport and the trains and the buses. There's a lot of talk around that kind of community transport, around like mini buses or maybe car sharing schemes, ideas around that. A lot of discussion around active travel, both kind of within villages and towns and then between villages and towns being really, really key. And these kind of NMU, these non-motorized routes between communities. And then a huge amount of discussion around connecting up modes of transport. So bikes on buses, bike train timetable integration. And then quite a lot on cars as well, whether that's around kind of EV chargers or just reducing speed in settlements to make it safer. So we really see this like really kind of rich body of evidence from communities. I mean, it must be, I think it'll be around 3,000 people, if not more, who've contributed to these plans. across this area. The issues are transport is not joined up enough, it's not reliable enough, it's not at the right times, it's too complicated. And those kind of qualitative issues we see is that kids can't go to after school clubs because they can't get home afterwards, or community owned businesses cannot keep and retain staff because the public transport is too unreliable for someone to get to and from their work every day. So the issues are really kind of varied, but transport's kind of sitting very clearly as this kind of key issue in a lot of people's lives. A good thing to note is kind of what Doug said in the chat, was that it's different everywhere. Like we have places like Lagan and Dalwhinnie, which are really small communities, which are very different from Aviemore, you know, in terms of train links, bus links, the ability to drive, the ability to cycle. So it's, although we kind of can work across the area of Badenoch and Strathspey, it's really important to recognise that every single settlement has a different kind of constellation of issues and a different constellation as well of opportunities with that. The solutions are tricky. When we write these plans up and we're kind of working with this kind of big collaborative set of community groups, so I'll go out to Nethy Bridge and we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, so what are we going to do about these transport issues? And that's when like the kind of blank faces come and it's like, we don't know what to do. It's really hard to tackle transport issues as a community group. That's the feeling. It feels quite disempowering. It's like, well, we've asked Stagecoach, or we want more train stops, but it's just not possible, or we've asked for this to be done and it's just not worked. So any solution that can empower people, bring people together and create a way forwards, I will always be completely behind. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things going on in Badenoch and Strathspey already. I mentioned the Community Transport Company, which is fantastic and award-winning. There's a transport forum that's just been restarted by the council, which is bringing together different service providers and community groups. So that had its initial meeting earlier this week. So that could be a really interesting opportunity for things, for discussion and partnership working. And there's different kind of active travel projects, and even towards informal car sharing schemes going on. So there's a lot happening. But
I'll have to interrupt.
Okay.
Time. I'll have to hand you over to time. But it's giving you a really good idea of what we're talking about in this session with Alice, and she and I can eat coffee and cake until the cows come home. But the RIMP is going to be a really useful tool for people in the area. So thank you, Alice. And she's also moving house today, so she's given me the time. So I'm real privilege. Peter, we're going to go to Orkney now. Peter.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm Peter Long from Community Energy Scotland, one of the project managers, and I'm based in Strummins, up in Orkney. Grew up here myself. We're a company of about, we're a third sector company of about 28 people spread across Scotland, and about 7 of us in Orkney. So currently I'm managing the Rural Energy Hub project. That is an Innovate UK funded project looking at non-technical barriers across power, heat and transport. And Community Scotland is leading a work package on community transport. We've done some work with mainly the island-based development trusts in Orkney over the last 15 years or so. Some projects delivering some electric vans and car chargers, and most of our bread and butter work is enabling community groups with wind turbines and solar panels, and maybe more laterally it's the policy side, it's the strategy side, it's research, it's development. And we saw an opportunity and a need to focus in on the barriers to community transport rather than a few large-scale development projects, looking at what hardware can do to solve some issues around the congested grid in Orkney. So we have been working for the last 15 months with 12 community groups spanning across Orkney and Shetland. And the idea being to create this network that we just referred to as experts community practice. If you treat the community groups as the experts rather than paying a consultant to come in and provide the answer, but at the same point use this opportunity to inject new information as well into these groups, because we've said it over and over again on this meeting already that each community group is unique, and I see the same over and over again with neighbouring islands, that they're so unique from each other, but at the same point they have significantly overlapping barriers and opportunities, and that's what we're trying to nail down with this network, is how can Rousey help Edie with a particular thing, and how can North Yell help North Ronaldsay with a particular thing, and just so the main outcome is that each of them are going to have a community transport strategy by the end of September this year, fingers crossed, and then by the end of October, what I'm seeing is in the UK are paying for a replicability model and a lessons learned report on how this. So feeding the tying this all back into the RIMP is been very handy for us to have a structure to then help these community groups with a template of how to produce these strategies, just to make their lives as easy as possible, because what I'm learning is they are already at 100% capacity and I'm asking them to do another 2 days of work a week. So just make their lives as easy as possible, because they're all working in 5-year plans, climate change action plans, development plans, tourism plans, and I'm asking, can they also do a community transport plan as well? So, so it has been very much appreciated to have this mobility plan. I'll stop there and I'll hand over to Caroline.
That's grand. Thank you so much. Like the speakers who've just come before me, there's a lot of common themes. So my name is Caroline Hood. I work at Nestrans. We're the Regional Transport Partnership for North East Scotland, and we cover the Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council areas. And across that, we have approximately 500,000 citizens spread across quite a wide geographic area. Jenny asked me along today to speak about quite a specific project that's going on in the region called Just Ask Boindy. This is in the Banffshire area, and it focuses in on some work that was done by the Banff and Buchan Rural Poverty Fund, because like Alice mentioned, there's this recognition that transport is a golden thread. And for me, my starting point is that transport is a social justice issue. So this Just Ask Boindy project has a £100,000 grant, and there's 2 strands to the project. One is very much focused on crisis and welfare support, so focusing on that issue of poverty, which affects so many of our rural communities, and in particular in the Banff and Buchan area. The second strand to this is really the bit I'm here to talk about today, is a community transport theme. And in partnership with an organisation called Banffshire Partnership, there is a desire to try and expand the community transport offering in that area. Banff and Buchan is a little bit of a community transport desert in some places, and there's a desire here to make some real improvements. So I'll give you a couple of examples of some initiatives that the Banffshire Partnership have planned. One is a collaboration with Chalmers Hospital, which is the local hospital in Banff. And this is about getting people to appointments. There's a lot of interest as to perhaps why people don't attend appointments. Are there transport issues? I suspect so. So there's work ongoing with Chalmers Hospital to look initially at a small pilot of getting some people to a group physiotherapy class. And I'm working with the Passenger Transport Unit in Aberdeenshire Council to try and encourage them to expand this out with getting help of RVS. That is challenging because of the lack of volunteers. Alice is nodding, you'll know the issues. To try and expand that to a car service for those individual appointments. The second initiative is really interesting, and it links into this point about in-work poverty, which we know is a growing issue. in that there's been a desire from the community in Banff for a shopping service to run to the larger town of Inverurie, which is about 30 miles away. And they want this to be run on a Saturday and a Sunday, because it's people who perhaps traditionally could not access community transport offering on the Monday to Friday. And it's to allow them to get to a wider range of shops in Inverurie, places like Home Bargains, Iceland, Farm Foods, the Nickel and Dime store, to try and get around that poverty premium that we know exists in communities. So really excited to see where this Just Ask Boindy project goes. It will run for 2 years. Nestrans are lucky enough to be involved, and community transport is one of the things I'm super enthusiastic about. So I'm delighted that Jenny asked me along to speak about this today. I'll stop there, Jenny, because I'm keen to be able to allow time for questions. Thank you so much.